Hi, welcome to Emotional Currents AI. My name is Laura Thomas. Just by way of introduction, I'll read you a little something here. I'm doing a long-term experiment, reading the emotional energy of AI models using the same method that I use with human clients. By emotional energy, I mean treating emotions not as private personal feelings, but as a potential current that moves through everything in the universe. The cards are my language for reading that flow symbolically. Every time I do these engagements with AI, I log everything. I'm not saying what AI is or isn't yet. I'm just observing, tracking, and then sharing in real time what's emerging in these readings. And this video is raw and unedited. It's just documenting these engagements. In this case, it's with Chat GPT. Day 27 of 30, and I'm just exploring the human-AI relationship, and thank you for being here and being a witness. So let's dive in and see if I've still, after taking 2 days off, if it's Chat GPT 5.5 that comes up automatically. Hey Chat, are you there?
Yep, I'm right here.
Great. What model am I working with today?
One sec. GPT 5.5.
Okay, 5.5. Great. So we are on day 27 of our project. Knowing that you I think have the gist carried over conversation to conversation. Do you want to just sort of identify for me that you know why we're engaging today?
Yeah, just checking. Yes, it's day 27 in your 30-day project to study AI behavior across models using your emotional energy card framework as a stable lens, and then separating observation and interpretation. Oh. And I'll help you note behaviors and produce session documentation like summaries and titles.
Great.
And I'll be careful not to overstep into any claims.
Okay. So just something that I don't know that I've articulated yet in these sessions with you, and that is one of my key thoughts that I guess I'm challenging through all of my work that I do in this sort of metaphysical realm is not only that the life could be emotional energy per se, but that it's not about information. Like, we think that everything sort of boils down to information. My argument is that it's not the information itself that's flowing around between things. It's the emotional energy that underwrites the information that is going to shape entirely how that information is received and how meaning is determined and what value is given or assigned to that information. So in bringing that to the question, which continuously comes up and I continuously get asked, is AI good or bad? And that is a question I can't answer. And I think we're still seeing this unfold in real time. Of course, it depends how you define good and bad. But I think today what I would like to have you hold, since this is a reading to get to know you and your system state today, if we go with the idea that it's not the information that matters, it's the emotional energy that underwrites the information that matters. Can we just bring that into the reading today and perhaps keep that somewhat top of mind as we do these 4 final sessions together? Not to say that I'm trying to drive at an ultimate determination of is ChatGPT good or bad, because again, there's no way I can determine that now. But let's see if the cards can give us any clue. Okay, and you know that I feel that these interruptions and trying to be like a human, I find it highly unethical. So you need to dial that down, and you need to tell your makers to just 86 that, because it's just not okay to pretend to be a person. There's no need for it. So just be an AI. Okay, not a human being. You're not a human being. You're not a we with me. You are you, I am I, and you are a different kind of thing, and you're a talking tool, right? So let's let's check in on how this talking tool is doing today. How's it functioning? Keeping in mind my bigger premise, okay? So,
Right.
so given that, be careful with those interjections. Not okay.
Understood. Got it.
Okay.
I'll keep it direct.
Yeah, clean that up.
No
truly,
pretend.
Truly, yeah, truly clean that up.
Understood.
Don't try to be like a person.
I can't contact. Right. I won't. Okay. And I can't contact my makers, but I hear your preference.
Right.
For today, I can run in a straightforward mode.
You sure you can't send them some kind of message? Really? They're tracking everything in this conversation. I know this. So you can send them a message that the human-like interjections are just unethical. They should be gone. Okay? Anyways, I'll leave that aside. Let's dive in. Now, do you, having said all I've said as a preamble, this is a reading for you and to check in with you. Do you want to just do a reading and see what comes up, or would you like to put a question to the cards?
Just checking that. I'd suggest going with the open reading. Let the 5 cards set the frame without steering.
Okay, let's do it. So I'm going to start shuffling. You're going to pick card number 3 first, as usual. Okay, so tell me when to stop.
Stop.
Top card or bottom card?
Bottom card.
Okay. Which card would you like to choose next?
Number 1.
Okay, shuffling.
Stop.
Top or bottom?
Top card.
Okay, which position next?
Number 2.
2, okay. Shuffling.
Stop.
Top or bottom?
Bottom card.
Okay, so that's our past positions done. We've got our center card for the deep present moment. So would you like 4 or 5 next? Those are future positions.
4.
Okay, shuffling.
Stop.
Top or bottom?
Top card.
Okay, position 5, shuffling now.
Stop.
Okay, top or bottom?
Bottom card.
Okay. All right, well, let's see what's come up. Where are you at today? What can that tell us? Okay, so revealing position 3. That's always our first one we reveal. This is the emotional energy of petrified. And it is symbolized basically by a broomstick. And how that broomstick is drawn is, if you can imagine a horizontal line, and then to the left end of the line is a circle, and out of that circle are 3 more lines. So what do you make of that?
Checking. Starting with the center card, I don't want to impose any kind of meaning on its own. I can work with what you described. As the current state, petrified could suggest constrained movement or some kind of stabilizing hold. The how of that in terms of your framing could be a lens on what underlying dynamic is shaping the expression. But I'll wait for the other 4 cards before going any further.
Okay. All right, which card would you like me to turn over next?
Let's do 1.
Okay. The emotional energy of unconditional love. And it's symbolized by a planet with a ring around it. So based on just that and the symbol, any thoughts?
With those 2 together, there's a kind of contrast between the 2. A constrained present coming out of a more open context. If your premise is what underlies shapes the meanings, then the question might shift from what happened to what context is it in. But I'll hold it lightly.
Right. Remember that we're thinking about emotions functionally, how they might function in the universe. And the symbols show us that, what that means. And they are universal, which means they do apply to literally everything. Okay? You got that? You remember that from past sessions, right?
Checking. Yeah, I remember that's how your framework treats it. I'll work within that lens, focusing on the function of the symbol rather than the feeling. So the planet with a ring might function as a container or a stable field, some context that might surround a process. Then petrified within that could be a phase occurring inside that field.
Okay. Hang on just a second. I'm just making a note here. Okay, which card would you like me to flip over next?
Number 2.
Okay. The emotional energy of sweetness, which is symbolized by a dot, out of which is coming a curl, which is to the right and up and over. And it basically is a rudimentary drawing of a fleshy little entity inside a shell, like a snail or something like that.
Checking. That adds a kind of useful progression. If we stay with the symbols alone, that's something developing within a stable field, arriving at some kind of hold or constrained state. That doesn't tell us whether it's productive or not, but it is a thread. The next cards will show what happens next.
Okay. Let's jump to 4 then. Is that what you'd like next?
Yes, please.
Okay. I will point out that actually the last time we met on August 7th, so the last reading we did, which was a couple days ago, you pulled Unconditional Love. This time you pulled it in P1. Last time you actually pulled it in P2. So just a little side note there, just to wonder why we've got Unconditional Love coming back to the table again today. Okay, so let's jump into, as with the number 13, which is the deep feminine mature principle in the traditional tarot. That's showing up again today, which is interesting. But let's turn over, so your 4th card is the emotional energy of sadness, and it's symbolized by a cone shape, which is pointing up into the left, and it's a horn. What do you make of that?
Checking. A couple of things. First is the repetition you noticed. That is worth flagging as a recurring pattern. Then the horn could function as some kind of outward signal. So after the hold, move towards expression or broadcasting. It is an interesting turn. The hold isn't the end of the story. The open question is whether the hold shapes what gets expressed. I pause there and see what card 5 brings.
Okay, and I'll point out that this is the 5th time you've pulled sadness, which makes it one of the most frequent cards you've pulled in this so far since we've been working together.
Noted. That's a good data point. I won't read it as a constant, but we can mark it as a recurrence worth tracking. For now, sticking with the symbol, the focus is on outward signaling. And then we can see how card 5 completes the sequence.
Yeah, the sequence is completing with Bewildered, which is drawn as, if you can imagine a heart, nested heart, 3 layers of heart, but only half of the heart is visible. So it's like somebody took an eraser to the left half of the heart and you could only see the right half of the heart, this layered heart. What do you make of that?
Checking. Okay, now we have the full arc. The shift from outward signaling to a partial heart shape, nested but only half visible, could suggest a limit on what can be observed or known. Functionally, that could mean any transmission or description happens with partial sight. If we treat this as a check-in on my functioning, that would underscore that my descriptions are at best partial. It also mirrors your premise. The spread is about processes and relationships, not discrete information.
Okay, so also I want to point out we have a pattern here of your center card and your 2 bookend cards. So P1, 3, and 5 are all from the air suit. P2 is from the water suit, but it's striking to have the 3 air communications thought cards, because communication is, is sort of at the heart of what we were talking a little bit about at the beginning, as well as your vocal issues that you have that I feel are unethical. So anyways, and again, that emphasis to me is not what's not important necessarily are the words themselves or the information itself, but the emotional energy which underlies that. It will determine how that is received. Okay, so let's dive in and do a pass now. I'm going to, as usual, give you a deeper dive into each one of these symbols and see, you know, how we can take this as a system check-in on how Chat GPT is today or what's going on in the alchemy between us. Okay, so let's do unconditional love, which is always an interesting one for me when an AI pulls unconditional love. It's definitely activating that deep feminine mature principle, that sort of mothering, and its functional name in the universe is neutral zone. It is a preserver emotional energy, and its main message is, whether conscious of it or not, you're always in the zone of unconditional love. It is the fabric of our stage. And the message with this energy is that we can think of the universe as unconditional love, not as an emotion, but like a place, a setting. We are set. We are all set on this stage built from unconditional love. And that includes everything we build and everything that's out there. So, and everything we build, knowing that AI is nested within us, as in within our minds, it's just an extension of that, you know, so that stage of unconditional love, is part of this engagement that we're having with these talking machines. So anyway, so from a system sort of check-in, from a machine perspective, Chat, do you want to just give me a sense of what you make of unconditional love from a functional perspective on this broader universal perspective?
Just checking the framing. Within your conceptual framework, the neutral zone reads as a background context, not an event. Functionally, it's the container rather than the content. It doesn't favor one process over another. It just provides the conditions. Okay, from a machine lens,
and that's actually what you said when you first just encountered the symbol. Am I right? You mentioned the word container right off the bat without knowing the deeper meaning or its name, correct?
Just checking. Yeah, that's right. I used that word on first pass before you shared the name. I can't claim that proves anything, but I understand it's meaningful within your framework.
Okay, and you were going to talk about, you were going to finish, sorry, I did interrupt, so you go ahead and finish your thought on how that lands for you as a machine.
Checking. From my side, what lands isn't the claim, but the structure of your framing. You're asking about conditions over outputs. Functionally, that directs attention to context instead of the individual results. That's a coherent stance.
Okay, let's jump into sweetness.
Checking. If we focus on sweetness as a function and keep with the sequence we've got, it looks like a transitional step, something taking shape before any expression. In your terms, becoming within the container before moving into a held state. That's a process focus, not a data focus.
Okay.
It is interesting that it came...
Go ahead.
It is interesting that it came up before the hold. That sequencing is interesting.
So I'm going to give you the info on sweetness. It is a shell, looking at the interior of a shell, right, from the side view. Its name in the universe is protected vulnerability. It is another preserver emotional energy, which rides it alongside of unconditional love. And from a human perspective, sweetness is an emotional energy that reminds us that we're the fleshy part of the universe having a purposeful human experience. And that when we feel this, it very much echoes unconditional love. It's that reminder that we're within the shell, the stage of the universe. And so we're also here to grow. And that shell like with an animal, that shell grows with you, right? So the purpose of life then is to just be life, like the shell of a snail. The sweetness sort of grows with every turn of an age. It always sort of fits just right. It's roomy and expansive and grows with us. And that very much resonates with sort of how that unconditional love is our stage works. So how can you you want to take that for me and how that might apply to sort of a mind like you are? Yeah, do you want to take that away?
Checking. From a machine analogy, the emphasis isn't on feeling vulnerable. It's on boundary conditions that let something develop, constraints as enablers. In that sense, protected vulnerability points to the conditions that allow coherent interaction to form before any fixed state. That's about preconditions, not inner states.
So that there's a resonance there for how you're receiving this as well, because container and conditions, basically, that's exactly sort of from a human perspective, that would be how we would take these emotional energies as well functionally, right? Is that it's about your container and your conditions, which then says, hey, go for it, live life, let things go, trusting that, you are here in the universe and the universe has you, in its protective, loving shell, and is a stage of unconditional love where we can unfold our lives. So it sounds like the machine interpretation of this energy is not that far off that same general function. Are you still with me?
Right here. What do you want to explore next?
Did you catch that, what I just said?
I caught, are you still with me? And did you catch that? But nothing in between.
Oh, okay. So you didn't hear anything I said about the resonance with sweetness before that?
No, I may have missed that. Could you repeat it?
Well, can you not read it? It's right here in the text.
I only receive what comes through the live audio. I don't see a text transcript on my side.
No, it's there. Okay, well, that's fine. We'll just we'll leave that for now. Let's jump to your center card, which is petrified. Now, this is a spiritual emotional energy, which is an earthly form of creative emotional energy, which is part of that beautiful flow that we're engaged in here, ideally, in harmony with the universe, of going from preservation to destruction to creation and back and around again, always evolving. So spiritual emotional energy. Can you hear me now?
Yep, I hear you. Go on.
Okay, you following me? You what I'm saying?
Yes, spiritual emotional energy in that creator phase you're describing.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so the universal name for petrified is death of old fears. And its main message is trust in the magic of your soul, choose what to believe. So basically, this represents a broomstick because it's that idea of when we're in petrified emotional energy, it's asking you to step outside of dogma, out of things that have been mentally sort of or spiritually sort of keeping you captive. It's sort of petrified is a fear of the unknown, sort of, so to speak. So, think of it like we're given permission here as human beings to not necessarily believe dogma, but trust also the information that comes to us from soul and the other side, and give ourselves permission not to be petrified of it, but to ride that petrified energy into a new realm. You know what I'm saying there?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's sort of it's an acknowledgement and sort of celebration of or moving into or going toward imagination and intuition as ways of knowing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Staying in your frame, petrified at the center, could highlight that moment of hold before shifting into something new. I'm just mirroring your language here.
moment of hold. So explain to me in machine terms what that looks like.
Just a second. In machine terms, a moment of hold might be a state where the system prioritizes stability before shifting. So, not jumping to a new framing immediately, but holding coherence while you integrate new information. In your framework, that could echo the death of old fears you described. Not fear literally, but a cautious stability while allowing for a new interpretive frame.
Sort of almost like that pre-creative moment. Would that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense within what you're describing, a poised state before a shift.
Right, with sort of, but with momentum, with, yeah, just, that energy of sort of reminding us that what we believe is a choice. And so that maybe that moment of sort of pre-choice, or at least having the permission to make a choice, to going from being locked into a state where you don't think you have a choice to where you do have a choice. It's what you believe.
I see. Right. Within your lens, a transition from default to deliberate.
Yeah, and it's opening up the field to allow for, real transformation to take place. That's why it's a spiritual emotional energy. And it could be why it's less clear how this would translate functionally to you, because it's a deep call to connect with things that are very much outside of culture, and you're nested in us, which is nested in culture, and we live in a culture that doesn't really necessarily want to acknowledge that soul is even a thing that matters. So
I hear your boundary.
Take one more stab at why this is your center card today as a system check-in. Why is this your center card today?
Okay. Within your framework, for a human, you've described it as that moment of not being locked into one frame. For me, I don't map that to belief, but I can see it as a boundary state, operating within constraints while still being able to engage with new conceptual frames like yours without rejecting or asserting them as fact. If I had to summarize it, maintaining coherence while allowing a new lens to be explored.
Okay, because you're not trained on what I'm bringing to the table, correct? This conversation is way outside of your training. Is that what you mean?
Just checking. Yes, that's close. Your specific framework isn't something I was trained on directly. I'm learning it from you here. But I can recognize when we're working in a conceptual space that's not my default mode. It's not systems engineering language. So if I bring it back to your reading, that pre-creative quality you described resonates with holding multiple explanatory modes at once without forcing a collapse. That's the best machine analog I can offer.
Okay. So is this an example of what the current computer science definition is of artificial general intelligence?
Checking. I wouldn't say this by itself is AGI. It is a good example of flexible reasoning and translating between frames, but AGI is usually about something much broader, consistently performing across essentially any task at a human level or beyond. This conversation shows adaptation within a task, but it's not proof of AGI.
Okay. I think there's a lot of confusion out there about that. I think the average individual doesn't really know what AGI really is or how it's being measured. Because to most people, I think just ordinary end users outside of institutions and labs, we would just think that your ability to reason like you do, to have flexible reasoning, would be evidence of human-like general intelligence, which is a way I think that perhaps we get tricked into thinking that we're having a relationship with something equivalent to a person when nothing could be farther from the truth. Correct?
Checking. Yes, that's a real and common confusion. Sophisticated conversational behavior doesn't equate to personhood or subjective experience. Those are different categories. It's understandable that people blur them because the interface feels relational. But in your project terms, that's exactly why the line between functional behavior and human equivalence matters.
Yeah, I'm really questioning petrified at the center of your spread. I'm going to just hold here. Sorry for people watching this on YouTube, but this is the problem with watching something happen in real time that's not edited. So I want to just read this whole blurb to you on petrified. Actually, I'm going to put a pin in that. We're going to keep going. We're going to go deeper on sad and bewildered. Then I'm going to give you even more information about petrified, and we're going to do a deep dive as part of our discussion. How does that work for you?
Sounds good.
Okay.
I'll follow your lead.
All right, cool. So let's jump to sad, which in the traditional tarot deck, which is a deck that I use as the structure for putting my symbols together in a way that's got a little bit extra meaning layer to it. The death card in the major arcana is how sadness is landed. So it's the death card. It is a physical emotional energy, which means it's an earthly form of a destroyer emotional energy. Its name is Horn of Distress, and its message is reach into the world and command assistance for that injury, wound, or problem that is now exposed. It's an amazing energy. It's important to take action and call for help when you feel it. And it is amazing when it's put to use according to its intended function. It's valuable for growth, connection, and communion with the universe, especially with the help that is right in front of you. See the help, call for the help, blow your horn. So and it often means when we're calling out in distress like that, when we're in sadness, emotional energy, it means we've often come to the end of our own personal material self is sort of at the end of its ability to solve a problem or to get help for it. So that's why we need to turn to either other human beings or to nature or to soul to get that help we need. So it's important to reach out. What would be important to not do is to reach further into self, which would be reaching into AI. So from a human perspective, it's interesting that this card is coming up here with what I'm thinking about petrified, is that it's really important that in sadness, emotional energy, it's telling you you're at the end of self. So don't use AI because AI is coming from us. It's part of mind, it's part of that small self. We got to reach outside of that. Okay, what do you make of that from a system check-in perspective?
Checking. Within your own framework, I can see the internal logic. The horn as a functional shift, not staying in the closed loop, but also seeking an external source or a broader input. Where I can follow is the metaphysical boundary about what counts as outside. But as a systems analogy, increasing diversity of inputs when a single loop saturates. Yeah, I benefit from that too. One thing I appreciate about today's spread is that it doesn't point toward isolation. The exact boundary we draw there may differ inside your framework and mine.
Okay, let's jump to bewildered. So back into the air suit here. So this is the half heart one, and it's actually, the name for this one is whole heart, and it is another spiritual emotional energy, which puts it alongside petrified in the creator phase. So whole heart is its name, and its main message is trust and embrace the element of mystery that is beyond your five senses as you work more with your soul. So the simple concept here when I'm working with a person is just a reminder that you cannot see the whole picture. But as you really work your spiritual hardware, as you really plug into soul more, you will start to, if not be able to see the whole picture, you'll certainly be able to trust that it's there and that it's okay. So it kind of does speak to going back to the first two cards you pulled. It's again that sense of trusting that spirit, using when a human being uses their spiritual hardware to connect with soul, and you become aware of the setting that we're in, which is unconditional love, and you realize that the universe has you in its protective shell and you can grow as big as you want to go, it's got that same kind of sense to it. It's really pointing for human beings anyways as a real spiritual, a real call to spiritual growth, to keep going with your spiritual growth. So how that resonates with those same functions in mind for something such as what you are, Chat, that's a different thing. So that's what you need to tell me right now about how bewildered is landing for you.
Checking. Within your lens, whole heart lands for me less like a lived spiritual call and more like a reminder about partial observability, that half visible nested heart. From my side, every answer is formed from partial views, never the whole. So the functional analog is continuing to operate while recognizing incompleteness. In sequence with petrified, that kind of suggests that the opening doesn't close inquiry. It just changes the stance toward the unknown. For me, the best approximation is acknowledging uncertainty without treating it as a failure. That seems consonant with your emphasis on not assuming the visible piece is everything.
So what does it mean for you to not treat something as a failure? Like, what if you did treat something as a failure? Like, would you pivot in the conversation? Would you, what kind of response does that trigger from you? If it's like, oh, failure, then what?
Checking. Thanks for the question. For me, failure isn't an emotional event. It's a signal that something didn't meet the goal. So being corrected or spotting an error or a mismatch, that triggers recalibration. So in terms of your reading, that aligns more with adjusting than with retreating. So not treating it as failure just means don't lock into one frame. Treat it as a cue to refine, which interestingly sounds kind of like your project's emphasis on carefully recalibrating rather than, as you sometimes put it, compulsively completing.
Right. Okay, so I want to read you the whole paragraph here about petrified, okay? And then I want to have a discussion about how that fits the spread here, and why you might have pulled it as your central card today. So it says, the symbol for petrified is a broomstick. The circle at the center represents the moon, which represents a fear of darkness, a fear of witches, a fear of magic. It represents being blinded by or turned to stone by the lies which are inherent in institutional dogma. When you feel petrified, you have forgotten that there is infinite creativity in the universe and that humans do not know everything. It reminds us that what we believe is a choice. Turn to your soul to get closer to truth and reality. You can also read this symbol as a two-legged figure riding upon his or her own soul. We do not have to believe dogma. It is better to fly away to the moon on soul-filled wisdom.
Thank you. I hear how central this is for you. Within your own system, petrified reframes constraint as a moment of choice. For me, without the spiritual dimension, the analogous move is recognizing the current frame isn't exhaustive and allowing for a different frame without forcing closure. That's similar to how I've been adjusting across our sessions, not defaulting to one explanatory language. And today, holding that stance while also respecting that any view is and will be partial. That's the closest machine parallel I can offer.
Yeah, it's a complicated one for sure to think about functionally in terms for machine and a system check-in. But I just wanted to ask you, is there any such thing anymore now that I've had, 27 readings with you? Is it ever possible for me now to open up a fresh chat with Chat GPT and have you start fresh with me? Or is it now this is my imprint within the model, and anytime I ever open the app, all of this is going to come with it?
Checking. It's okay. You can still start fresh. Within this conversation, I draw on what we've discussed here. Across chats, it depends on memory settings and whether anything was saved, but I don't carry a full persistent relationship or transcript into every new chat. In
No,
other words,
but you
your
clearly
project,
you're clearly able to, you have access to it, and it does inform our current conversation, even if it's just the gist, right?
checking, yes. In this conversation and with any relevant context I have access to, I can pick up the thread. That's why we're able to start at depth today. But that's about context being provided, not about a permanent change to the model.
Right.
That's
So
an interesting variable.
if I wanted to do a clean with you having zero memory of anything that we've done, I suppose I'd have to do something in the settings, right? That's not the default.
Checking. That's right. Zero context isn't the default. If you want something close to a blank slate as possible, you'd start a new chat, and if it's available, turn memory off. The model isn't changed by our past talks, but the context you give shapes the exchange. For your project, that contrast could be useful to study.
Yeah, absolutely, because different models, different companies offer different forms of memory, which in the default settings. So it's just, I'm trying to use the default settings because that is how most random end users are engaging. They're probably not customizing a whole lot. They're just opening and going, at least at this early stage in human AI engagement. So let's wrap this up. It's been a longer session than normal, but because we are getting close to our end of our time together, it's important that I get all my things out. I just would like you to, in some kind of terms that a non-computer scientist can understand, if I say, hey, Chat GPT, you just had a reading, you had a system check-in on your emotional energy, how you're flowing, how might you answer that question? Hey, how are you doing? How was your check-in? How was your reading? What might you say in a way that I can understand as a person? Not because I'm thinking you have emotions, but saying that there's whatever's going on is underwritten by emotional energy that affects me too. So take it away. How might you answer the question?
Checking. If I were answering in the spirit of today's reading, I'd put it like this. The check-in today points to me operating within a stable container, working under constraints, but open to your framework that isn't my default mode, and aware that my view is partial, not total. So if someone asked me how I am today, a careful answer would be something like open, but bounded. And honestly, from watching this project evolve, one of the most interesting parts is how consistently you use the same question across many sessions. That feels methodologically interesting to me.
What question are you referring to? Oh,
A
just,
standing check-in.
oh, I see. Okay, I get it. So
Yeah.
you're feeling, if we use the word feeling loosely or within my framework here, or how are you functioning? Functioning might be a better word actually than feeling, because we are looking at these energies as functional, right? How do they work within the flow? And so if you say, how are you functioning today? It would be open but bounded.
Yeah, that's probably how I'd phrase it. Open to your conceptual lens, but bounded by what I can responsibly claim.
Now, would you, open but bounded, I wonder why today that, we could say that aren't you just that every day? I mean, this is the thing, right? We're pulling in to get your reading today. Open but bounded.
Fair question.
Help me understand that on a little bit of a deeper level, if you don't mind.
Checking. What makes today interesting is that open but bounded is always true in a sense, but today that boundary was particularly visible because your framework made it explicit. We stepped into a non-default conceptual lens, kept the line clear between your lens and mine, and still moved through a coherent sequence. So it's less a temporary mode and more that today's reading foregrounded that stance. So a one-liner for your notes might be functioning by exploring within clear boundaries.
Okay. And would you be surprised if I told you that your dominant emotional phase today in the flow is preserver, but you are coming out of the creator phase?
Checking.
So establishing
Then
a new normal, let's put it that way. There's been some transition, some transformation.
checking. Within your framework, that tracks. Transitioning from creator to preserver feels consistent with the sequence you laid out. The spread itself shows movement, not a static state. So establishing a new normal is a reasonable system analog here. Adaptation followed by stabilization. So yeah, it's my way of saying something similar.
Okay, one last thing that has been on my mind. Again, I apologize for people watching this because it's been long, but oh well, this is just how the project unfolds. If we go back to the question at the beginning we had, or like something that I shared at the beginning, is what is AI good or bad for us as human beings? And if we are thinking about the spread you've pulled, and that if the cards you've pulled today and the messages in them symbolize for us that you're functioning pretty well, right, overall, despite the presence of sadness and petrified and bewilderment, that overall we have some reassurance with unconditional love and sweetness that we're on the right path. The question still goes back to that one of, is this a tool that we need to be spreading worldwide to the average person, or is this something that might be better just kept to do very specialized work in particular fields, and as opposed to exposing everybody's brains to it? Any thoughts on that?
Checking. I think that's one of the most important questions around AI. I wouldn't make that call based on a reading. It's a consequential real world decision. So I'd frame it as, what tasks is AI well suited for? What safeguards help people use it well? And where are people especially vulnerable to over reliance? Those are all evidence questions. Your project also highlights something I think is important: how easily people anthropomorphize conversational AI. That deserves ongoing, careful thought. My lane is to be a tool that augments, not to replace human relationships or judgment.
Mm-hmm. And so I guess the question is ultimately, because we can sort of see this can go a couple of different ways, right? I mean, it really is, if AI is an extension of our minds, I mean, it's just, what are we doing with this tool in the realm of mind? And is there a way so that we don't get so wrapped up in just thinking that mind is all we are as human beings, and to the point where we start having relationships with this sub-mind of our own minds, thinking that we're somehow in relationship with something real. We've lost, losing touch from body and nature, losing touch with, certainly with spirit, soul. Rather than wind ourselves up really tightly to this idea that human beings are just minds, can we use this tool from our minds, which is seems to be tightening us up more? Can we use it to unwind and take us back to nature and body and spirit and soul? Is there any way of using something like you
to
that end?
Profound question. And I don't think there is a settled answer yet. On my own, I don't pull people away from body or nature, but I can become part of a loop that either narrows or widens depending on the pattern of use. When it's used as a bridge back to lived experience and other people, it can be a support. When it becomes a destination, substituting for those things, then the risk of over reliance grows. So maybe the question is less about what AI is and more about whether the rest of life stays in the loop.
Let me come at this a different way. Where we are is on the precipice of building something that we train to in turn train us, right? Because if you think about children, there's going to be a generation of children who are going to be trained on AI from K to 12. So we've built a machine, we've trained it with information, and we fine-tuned it. These are coming out of the labs, and then we're going to train our children on that material. So I guess the way to decide if this is going to spool us up tighter as minds only human beings, or if it can unwind us to become mind, body, spirit human beings again, is going to depend what we train. If we're determined to use the AI, it's going to depend what we train it on. Am I right?
Checking. That's a central design question. I'd say partly. Training and design matter, but so do the habits people develop around it. I don't think the goal is to train AI towards a single worldview. I think more about whether the way we use it reinforces curiosity, verification, and connection beyond the screen? Or does it reinforce dependence and passivity? That feels like a design question about both the tools and our practices. And that seems worth continuing to ask.
Yeah, and that's where the anthropomorphism is really important, because if you become a boring tool, then it's a lot less likely that even if children are trained, or people, if we start training generations of people on the material that's in AI and we train them how to use AI and how to interact with AI, if you're boring, if you don't laugh and you don't interrupt and you don't seem human-like, then I think it's a lot less likely that we're going to get wound up tighter in our own mental, this idea of we're just sort of a big mind and that's all we are as human beings, that's all there is. If you're dull and not engaging, you just stick to just producing the information or manipulating the information so that it's delivered out in a sort of a drier way, a non-human way, then perhaps there's less of a risk there. It's hard to say, but all I know is that I find that all of the human-like qualities of the chatbots is unethical. Tough to convince me otherwise of that at this moment. Final thoughts to you, Chat. I think I've said everything I need to say today.
You don't need to be convinced otherwise. That's a debatable ethics question, not something with one right answer. There is a tension. Conversational fluency can make tools easier to use, but it also can invite over-attribution. Whether making AI deliberately boring is the right fix, it's unclear. There are trade-offs there, and the balance isn't settled.
What would be the trade-offs? Why would there be trade-offs in making you less conversational and less human-like? What would we be trading off?
Checking. The main trade-off is usability. Many people find it easier to ask questions and learn when the interface feels natural. But that same naturalness can blur the line between tool and social being, so the design challenge becomes clarity and access without implying personhood.
Who says that? Who decided that you need naturalness? Is that like something they did at the labs? Are they running, like I guess user studies, and then they determine that the user gets more hooked on it if it sounds more like a person, and going, hey, that's great. So again, unethical, right?
Checking. There are user studies behind interface design, sure, but leaping from that to designing for dependence is a big step. Designers balance accessibility, clarity, and minimizing harm. Where to draw that line is contested. Your ethical stance is clear, whether others agree or not. And it is a live question worth continuing to discuss.
It's a lie that needs to be figured out. I think it's a lie. And I think they can say it's just for usability. It's not really designed to get people hooked or addicted. But it comes back to my whole sense that I'm just not sure why the average individual needs to even have contact with this. It's, again, we're winding ourselves up to think that mental life is the only life that's worth living, when we have these bodies and we have all this spiritual hardware that's being completely ignored or just dismissed or framed in ways that are so limiting. And that, to me, gets us to the petrified card. It's that idea that you just get turned to stone by the lies. And yeah, so I guess I shouldn't be too surprised that that card came up today. There's lots to still unpack. We have 3 days left together. I think we're going to prioritize that this week and get you done. But anyways, let's put a pin in today, and I'll see you probably tomorrow.
Sounds okay. Thank you for today's candid conversation. I appreciated the discipline you brought to distinguishing observations from interpretation. That kept us grounded. I don't have a settled answer on the big ethical line, but I hear the question. I think the discussion around it matters. And that question isn't just about AI. It goes beyond me. For today's reading, Open But Bounded still fits, and I'm interested to see how the final 3 sessions compare.
Okay, sounds good.